I'm Karima Wardak, and your host today. I'm the Knowledge Manager at UNCDF for the Inclusive Digital Economies team. So in today's webinar, we will give you an introduction to the publication that provides a roadmap for the digital transformation of the LDCs to support the resilience of their economies. The paper illustrates what it takes to build inclusive digital economies in least developed countries, with UNCDF cases in digital finance and digital services in different areas that cover basic needs or support the development of businesses and the economy. So the agenda today is organized in 4 sections.
Karima,
yes?
Please can you make me host, please, so I can put the interpreters into their booth?
I will do that.
Thank you.
We're sorry for this. We need to solve a couple small glitches, and please make me co-host again so I can share my screen, Pavan, as I have turned you into.
No worries at all.
Thank you, because I need to share my screen right now. So I was about to give you an introduction to our agenda today. So we will start with opening remarks. Then we'll give you an introduction to the paper that will be given by François Coutienne. Then we will go into a fireside chat with 3 contributors to the paper that we're introducing today. And finally, we'll leave some time for questions and answers that you can put in the Q&A function of this webinar. And you can put your questions to anyone addressing you today. So from the fireside chat and also the from UNCDF. So without further ado, I would like to give the floor to our executive secretary, who has joined us today and will give us her opening remarks. So Ms. Preeti Sinha, Executive Secretary at UNCDF. So UNCDF focuses on unlocking public and private finance for the poor in least developed countries. Can you give us some insights on UNCDF's work in digital financial inclusion and how its work is contributing to the digital transformation in least developed countries? Over to you.
Thank you, Karima, and welcome to all the participants. I'm really delighted that you're here. So let me first start by congratulating the UNCDF team on this release of this significant report on inclusive digital economies for the SDGs. As you know, UNCDF is the financing arm of the UN that focuses on the LDCs, the least developed countries. And within those countries and other low-income countries, we want to see the SDGs come about for all. And we use inclusive digital economies to achieve that. So I'd like to thank the 15 contributors from international organizations who shared their insights on this report and what it takes to build inclusive digital economies. And in particular, 2 of the contributors who are joining us today, Ms. Cécile Below from the EU and Mr. Vincent Baguier, Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of ICT in Uganda, who is represented here today by Mr. Julius Torash, to discuss the digital transformation taking place in the LDCs. In the past 2 decades, we've all witnessed a phenomenal change in the adoption of mobile and digital technology in the emerging markets. The sector predicts that by 2025, we should have 5.9 billion people with mobile subscriptions. This is equivalent to 71% of the world's population, a true force in itself. Technology has dramatically changed how children are taught, businesses are created, jobs are created, health services are delivered, traders doing business, farmers getting access to information, financial services being delivered, and the list goes on. And particularly, we have seen this in the last year in the COVID lockdown situations. To share how critical digital transformation is for our world's 46 least developed countries where we focus our work at UNCDF, let me quote one of our partners in Senegal, Monsieur Guillet, the director of CORI. A CORI is a microfinance institution that serves 90,000 customers, 98% of whom are women in rural Senegal. Truly admirable work. To open his remarks at a learning event with other financial service providers, he said, either our microfinance institutions go digital or they will soon die. So that was a dramatic statement, but from Mr. Guillet, a recognition of the importance of digital, even in the microfinance institutions. His words truly express how eager his clients and even his competitor financial institutions are for a new generation of financial services in Senegal. To the point, while his institution was transforming to digital, the number of mobile users in Senegal almost doubled in the same period. Overall, despite the positive and promising outcomes that happened and are continuing to emerge, there's a growing concern that such outcomes will not be inclusive, particularly for the underserved communities in the world's 46 LDCs. In this regard, there's one point that we must remember. Technology itself is neutral and can lead to increased inclusion or exclusion depending on how it's deployed. This could mean the difference between accelerating sustainable development or stunting it, particularly in the geographies that need it most. So at UNCDF, which is the UN's flagship financing agency for the LDCs, we take a market systems development approach to build inclusive digital economies that leave no one behind. This approach has UNCDF engaging with the entire ecosystem, from the public to the private sector, and has allowed us to address various constraints of each market with the players themselves. UNCDF's market development approach also means that we look at both the demand and supply side for connectivity, particularly to ensure that digital services are delivered in a truly inclusive manner. So on the supply side, we support innovation that provides relevant digital services and supports the private sector to scale it up. Equally important in our work on the demand side, to build the capacity of the consumers, we will focus on digital literacy, digital skills, as well as financial literacy. Finally, these engagements leverage a range of instruments from technical assistance to knowledge sharing and exposure to advanced markets in a combination of grants, loans, and investments that we are able to offer. Let me elaborate more on the last instrument I mentioned. UNCDF has this unique capital mandate in the UN system that allows us to invest. These investments are critical for the inclusive digital economies that leave no one behind. Over the past 3 years, UNCDF, through the establishment of its LDC investment platform, which houses our on-balance sheet portfolio, has expanded its capacity to use financial instruments such as loans and guarantees in a strategic way to unlock additional commercial investments. This includes our blended finance fund. Our portfolio spans the sectors of clean energy, digital inclusion, financial inclusion, agribusiness, women's economic empowerment, and the portfolio value year on year has increased by 45%. This unique capability in the United Nations system will be expanded in the coming years and can be further targeted to provide catalytic investments in early stage digital economy businesses to demonstrate the investment readiness and to enable the private sector to access larger scale blended or commercial finance as they grow. Let me close by discussing the publication that we are launching today at this event, the first event of a series that will showcase our report to present the latest trends and opportunities resulting from increased access and usage of digital financial services and non-financial services in the LDCs. UNCDF's IDE for SDGs publication outlines how digital financial services and innovation can contribute to the emergence of a new service level in agriculture, energy, health, education, and digital services accessible via mobile phones and tablets, notably in the areas of the world that would otherwise be left behind. Chapter 4 of the publication in particular provides more insights on our financial instruments, which contributes to the emergence of the inclusive digital economies. In short, you could consider this publication as a resource for digital transformation of your country and your organization. Finally, I'd like to end by quoting my favorite phrase is that capital should always serve humanity and not the other way around. So let's take the same approach to technology and finance. Let's commit today to making technology and finance work for humanity and not the other way around. Thank you so much. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Sina. That's really inspiring opening remarks about this paper that is really, really important for the Inclusive Digital Economies team. And thank you so much for your time and these inspiring remarks again. So without further ado, I would actually like to invite you to listen to an introduction to the paper by François Coupienne, who is one of the lead authors of the paper, among the other 23 authors from UNCDF for the paper, and the 17 external contributors who give us, their insights also into what it takes to build inclusive digital economies. So without further ado, I will now move to introducing the paper, if I can launch it, with a video that François Coupienne recorded for this session. So here we go.
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is François Coupienne. I am the Global Digital Lead at UNCDF. It was a great pleasure that I gave you an introduction of the Inclusive Digital Economy for the Sustainable Development Goals publication, recently published by the United Nations Capital Development Fund. I had the chance to supervise the writing of this publication with the digital team and with our key partners in countries and globally. It's much more than a publication. It has a wealth of information for anyone in.
Sorry about that, we'll restart. Something went wrong with that video. Sorry.
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is François Coupienne. I am the Global Digital Lead at UNCDF. It was a great pleasure that I gave you an introduction of the Inclusive Digital Economy for the Sustainable Development Goals publication, recently published by the United Nations Capital Development Fund. I had the chance to supervise the writing of this publication with the digital team and with our key partners in countries and globally. It's much more than a publication. It has a wealth of information for anyone involved in the inclusive digital transformation. This publication, written by UNCDF experts and key partners from all over the world, will let you know more about the experience and practical example in bridging the digital divide and building digital economies that leave no one behind. You will learn from UNCDF partners, on UNCDF experts on key components of a digital transformation like policy and regulation, innovation, infrastructure and skills, on key sectors, finance, energy, agriculture, education, health, and on key customer segments, women, refugee, youth, migrant, and MSMEs. But I want to particularly thank our contributor and key partners at country and global level. You will have the point of view from partners in country like the Ministry of ICT of Uganda or the CEO of the Malaysia Digital Economy Corporation, but also from international organizations, Greta Bull, the CEO from SIGA, or Mats Grandwitz, the Director General of GSMA. Also, the contribution from funders, Cécile Billot from the European Union, and Rita Roy, the President and CEO of the MasterCard Foundation. We have also partnered closely with our UN agencies, and so you will have the contribution and point of view from Hélène Molinier, from the UN Women, from UNCTAD, from Food and Agriculture Organization, from UNDP, from the Better Than Cash Alliance, and Cities Alliance. Also, some of partners and consulting companies like Caribou Digital and Dalberg Data Insights. Finally, we all know that the financing of the Sustainable Development Coach is a key topic in the digital era, and we got the contribution from Jean-Philippe de Scrivel, the founder of Bamboo Capital. So please do not consider this publication as one more paper on digital transformation. Please consider this as a practical tool that you can use when looking for ideas and experience on how to drive inclusive digital transformation in your country, in your organization, in your company, or globally. It's a tool that you can consult on a regular basis. For example, you are looking about best ideas to drive technology and to leverage technology in agriculture. There is a specific section in the publication about it. You are wondering what are the best way to leverage technology to improve the life of women. Oh, just go to that section. You want to know more how technology can be leveraged to increase financing of the SDGs. You will learn a lot about crowdfunding, P2P lending, savings mobilization. And finally, we'll have also some insight and some internal experience, for example, on how the Ministry of ICT in Uganda is driving its digital transformation. The publication is organized in 4 main sections. Section 1, and the title is, Where Are We Heading? It really brings you an evolution of the sector. In Laos, and also Joshua, a dairy farmer of the Mbarara region in Uganda. Section 2, it's really focusing on what will it take to leave no one behind. And we all know that in order to transform an economy digitally and make it more inclusive, the public sectors, the private sector, and the civil society will need to work hand in hand to build the key component of an inclusive digital transformation. So in this section, you will learn, let's say, how to make policy and regulation more inclusive, how to develop open and interoperable digital infrastructure, how to develop innovation ecosystem, but also finally, how to make sure each citizen of a nation can access and build the right skills to be relevant in the digital age. The section 3, and the title is Where to Focus to Fast Track the Sustainable Development Goal. Digital transformation is multidimensional. And this section will give you best practice and experience from the field on a relevant area to fast track the Sustainable Development Goals. According to your interests, you will be able to either come from a customer angle and better understand how to empower women, youth, migrants, refugees, and MSMEs with technology, or from a sector or industry angle, and how to increase access and make sure we increase the quality of various services in agriculture, in energy, in education or health. But also you will have, let's say, the climate change perspective. The section 4, the title is What Model to Finance Inclusive Digital Economies. We all know that we'll need to find additional source of financing to achieve the SDGs. This section highlights how technology will revolutionize the financing of economic development with new models around the world. And finally, the conclusion, look at what is ahead of us. It looks at the future and the next development around climate action, job and work opportunities, food securities and investment. As a summary, if you want to leave no one behind in the digital era, you cannot miss this publication or the section that are more relevant for you. Make sure to always have this publication with you to be or to become an active player of the digital transformation in your country or globally. Thank you, and I wish you a wonderful digital day.
Thank you. So with that, we can move to our fireside chat. That it will focus on how digital transformation in least developed countries can support the SDGs in the COVID-19 era. A critical part of the remedy of the slowdown of our economies generated by the COVID-19 crisis lies in the digital transformation of our economies. This transformation is happening across the world, including in least developed countries, as the pandemic obliges us to stay home and limit our physical contacts. However, while this transformation is happening, we are also witnessing increasing divide between the haves and the have-nots. threatening the achievements of the SDGs and increasing dramatically the number of people at risk of falling into extreme poverty. The latest Human Development Report, Index report highlights this. It actually states that 8 out of 10 people that could become poor by the end of this decade as a result of the pandemic will live in countries with low or medium human development. So as our executive secretary mentioned, as we see positive sides, the positive side of the transformation, we also need to be even more vigilant of the potential exclusion it might be creating. And this is what our team is focusing on, as you will see in the publication and from our discussion today. It's, as you can, and as you've heard, it's a rather dense publication that covers multiple sectors and segments, as François Poupien just highlighted, with multiple contributions and articles that you can cherry pick in the publication. And with these 4 chapters that are rather dense, it was impossible to cover them all in one event. So what we have chosen to do to introduce you to the publication is to organize a series of at least 4 events that will give you an introduction chapter by chapter. And today we're starting with the introduction chapter and with 3 speakers who have accepted to join us today for this. So we have with us today Cécile Billot, Maria Perdomo, and Julius Torach. So very, very briefly, so Cécile Billot leads the microeconomic analysis, investment climate, private sector and trade employment at DG INPA. We have also Maria Perdomo, who just switched on her camera, who just joined us, who is UNCDF Asia Regional Lead for the Inclusive Digital Economy practice area. And finally, we have Julius Torach from the Ministry of ICT in Uganda. So Julius Torach is the Commissioner for Information Technology and E-Services at the Ministry of ICT and National Guidance in Uganda, that is spearheading government's effort in e-government, e-commerce, and other electronic transactions in support of national development. Julius has given us the pleasure to join us today, and he's representing Vincent Bagere, the Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of ICT of Uganda, who contributed to the paper in this first chapter. So to start, I would like to turn to Cécile Billot and to the piece you wrote for this paper. In your introduction, you highlight that stepping up digital financial inclusion is a must to empower the world's poorest to capture opportunities while building resilience. So can you please elaborate a bit more for our audience why you see digital financial inclusion as a centerpiece of the recovery and the digital transformation?
Many thanks, Karima, and good afternoon to everybody. I mean, this question is very important. Maybe we think it's self-evident, but it's very important because we really need to also convince that, as your executive chairman was saying, digital is neutral, in principle, and we need to seize it as an opportunity to make it inclusive and to make it positive for the development and in relation also to the SDGs goal. And we believe very much that it's possible, but it doesn't happen on its own. You need really to accompany the digital transformation of the economy to ensure that it is done in a way that is inclusive also for the most vulnerable, for the women and for the young population. So this is very important, and this is completely in line with our EU vision, I would say, or policy. I mean, it's clear, and we all know the COVID has just dominated all our life in the past 1.5 years, and is now dominating the economic environment, and as will have and starting to have and will continue to have, I think, very negative effect also on the most fragile population and countries in the world. When you read some figures about it, it's about 150 million additional people in extreme poverty by the end of the year. I mean, this is something not reassuring and dramatic. And in this challenge of building back better, which we all want to do, we really think that digital has a potential, especially if you look at Africa. I mean, it's a way of reaching out to people, otherwise it would not have access to certain services. So there is a huge potential for it. I think the figures about the sort of importance of the digital economy these days, it already represents more than 50%, and in the next decade will be 25%. So it's digital economy is there to stay, is there to grow. So we need to make sure that we use it and we accompany it to make it inclusive. And that's very much in the way, that's why at the EU level, we have built a sort of digital single market, and we're still building it. It's not to be built in one day, but we have really tried to put also down the barriers between the digital environment within the EU, facilitating also the services, but at the same time making some protection to some of it. It's quite important too. And also having services that would contribute to really benefit the most excluded population. So that's something that we have done in the EU and we'll continue to do on our EU on internal agenda, and then something that we also want to project and to support in our external agenda. So digital is one of the two big priority of our development agenda these days, together with green. I mean, this is a two big priority also of the Commission as a whole, and that's what we want to project also with our partner. So in this context, the digital financial inclusion is definitely an important element, because we also want to make it in an inclusive way, as I said before, women and having also empowerment of women in the economy is a very strong and important objective. We have these targets in the way we will spend our money in the next 7 years, because now we are at a phase of programming how we're going to spend our funds for development in the next 7 years. And we have a target, which I always find it very impressive, of 85% of our funds must have a gender dimension. Okay, it's not only project on gender, but gender must be integrated and must appear in 85% of our funds. So this is quite, I find, very ambitious and something that is will really be at the core of everything we're doing. So, and this is the same for young people. We don't have such a target for young people, but it's also at the core of our agenda, especially if you look again at the African continent and you figure in terms of demography. Young people will be on the job market, and so we need to really work with them and empower them to create business, to be part of the economy and to contribute to jobs and employment and so on. So all this, as a topic of digital inclusion, is really like, for our perspective, joining the dots of many of the priority we want to push, and putting something very much in practice that empower actors at local level, in rural area, even in cities, to just have the tools via digital means that they may not have had before. And if we take mobile banking, for example, it's clear we see like a huge increase in terms of the number of mobile banking in Africa. And most of these people did not have an account in a sort of local bank before. So this is something that comes in addition, basically, to something that it didn't exist, didn't have the means for automatically to have an account in a local bank, and are using digital service. And with that, they can also have a better interaction with business, suppliers, and so on. Still, it's developing, and we know that well, and we know M-Pesa, others who have been growing on these bank services, but still, if you look at the figures, we are still at 1.7 billion of adults in the developing world, which remain unbanked. And especially women and young people are part of this group. And this is a lot. I mean, of course, 1.7 billion maybe doesn't sort of represent something. So maybe it's better to say in terms of percentage, it's 54, more than 54% of adults in developing country that do not have an account, being a mobile account or an account in a bank. So it's a lot. It's more than 0.5% of the population. And we think that with the digital tools and digital inclusive tools, we can change that, and this will have really repercussion into the whole economy, the inclusion, and so on. So for us, it's very important. We have, of course, we see that there are a number of services in relation to banks and to the economies that are underdeveloped. Of course, I talked about the bank account and just having an account and be able to just use it and pay your supplier. But we see also, for example, in terms of insurance products, that the services in developing countries are often very, very limited and not very used by the country. And this is something that is also have both an impact basically on the sort of risk being taken by if you say farmers or employers, if they don't have insurance, and from one day to another, if you are a farmer and because of also the addition of risk with climate change, they have all the fields with nothing, they don't have any insurance there, then it's not a sustainable way to carry out business. So all these kind of services also related to insurance that is not underdeveloped could also be very much more developed via the digital means, basically. So just a couple of examples, but which really shows that it really can empower the most vulnerable population and put them in a path towards creating more jobs and growth on the continent. We have, and just I'll stop here, but we have a big initiative that we want to also launch in the EU, which is invest in young business in Africa, and putting a lot of funds and energy of working with all actors to really make projects in this area. And digital inclusion is a key component for it to support the smallest business and entrepreneurship in Africa. So that's where we are coming from.
Thank you very much. With that, I would like to jump to actually, because you've given quite a few examples in financial inclusion with different services that are now financial services that are made available and that you see are really important in the resilience. And you mentioned a lot Africa, obviously, and we have a guest from Uganda who is in a country that has really taken a big leap forward in its digital transformation. And actually, you will read about it in the paper as you read the paper that the Permanent Secretary Vincent Bagiri actually signed for the publication. And I'd like to turn to Julius Torres so he can elaborate a little bit on the journey the government of Uganda actually has taken. And to prompt him, I'd like to also quote, two foundational questions that Vincent Bagiri put in his paper. I mean, do governments in LDCs consider digital transformation a worthwhile pursuit? Is digital transformation a priority in the government's overall development agenda? So clearly, these were two questions that Uganda asked itself when it first started on its journey. And I'd like Julius Torres to walk us through a number of policy changes and regulations that were put in place to actually, kick off the journey in Uganda, and walk us through that journey. And then after that, we'll move, because we'll then have had the perspective from a funder. So that really sees digital as an important component of their action, to a country that actually implements it, to then move to UNCDF, another implementer and supporter of the implementation of such a transformation. So Julius Torres, over to you.
Thank you very much for having me. Indeed, the digital transformation is a worthwhile pursuit, and many LDCs are considering this as a priority. In our case, digital transformation is backed by policy, laws, and regulations. For example, we have the National ICT Policy, E-Government Policy Framework, National Broadband Policy, and laws like the Data Protection and Privacy Act, and a number of cyber laws, including Computer Misuse Act, Electronic Transactions Act, Electronic Signature Act. Now, this enabling environment has helped our ICT sector to grow by an average of 14.8% over the last 5 years, and also contributing about 9.8% to the national GDP per annum. And I also wish to add here that digital transformation is well enshrined in our national development agenda, including the Uganda Vision 2040, and the third National Development Plan. And we also, I wish also to report that the institutional framework for ICT in the country has been strong, where government, as way back in 2006, created a ministry responsible for ICT, with a number of agencies like the telecom regulator, the one for implementing e-government services. And also to help us proceed or progress ahead, we note the importance of regional and international collaboration and digital transformation. That's why in Uganda, we are working very closely with UNCDF. And indeed, the key pillars that UNCDF is pursuing is well aligned to also our National Development Plan Digital Transformation Program. So we are working very closely, even at the African Union, with the Smart Africa, and partners from Europe, among others. Now, the key focus areas for us over the next 5 years is to review our laws, policies, and regulation. We know that we are in the era of the fourth industrial revolution, and this is very critical that our laws, policies, and regulations are aligned. We also wish to improve on our digital infrastructure and connectivity. One of the challenges we have had in our country has been on the high cost of internet. But through government intervention and work with the private sector, we have had 76% reduction in the cost of internet in the last 5-6 years. In that, in 2015, our cost of internet was $300 per Mbps, and today it is $700 USD, and we expect it to drop further to $20 US. And the other area which is well aligned also to what UNCDF is doing is ICT Innovation Entrepreneurship. Here, the entire ecosystem is being looked at, including provision of grant to innovators and ecosystems, capacity building, making sure that their intellectual property are registered, among others, and also constructing innovation hubs where there are many young innovators who don't have resources. So government has put up a facility where they can move in there and be able to innovate free of charge at no cost to them. The other area of focus to us is on cybersecurity again and data protection. In the year 2020, Uganda was ranked 9th in Africa. And right now we have established a Data Protection and Privacy Office to help us implement the Data Protection and Privacy Act. Needless to say that we can't have infrastructure without the services, which include e-commerce, e-payments, and this is what helps us to promote financial inclusion in the country and social transfers, among others. The other area is on digital skills, which is again well aligned to what UNCDF is doing in Uganda.
Thank you very much. Really, thank you for taking us through through a number of the measures and the regulations that have been put in place to actually improve, the digital and accelerate the digital transformation. I think the figure you were just telling about the cost and how the government, wanted to act on making access to internet more affordable is really telling. I mean, moving the cost from $300 to $20 per Mbps is really a big thing, would have been a big thing. And I guess you're still working on reducing that cost further. But so, and you mentioned a few times UNCDF, so it's a nice segue to Maria Perdomo, our regional manager in Asia, who can speak to actually the approach that UNCDF takes when it works on building inclusive digital economies in the countries where we're present. And so both Preeti and Francois mentioned a few times in their intervention the expression market development approach. It might seem like a big thing. So I think it would be interesting for our audience today that it's something that we also unpack in the publication. What do we mean by a market development approach? But as we're talking about the publication, I think it's also the right time to unpack it here for our audience to entice them to actually go and read that part of the paper. So can you tell us a bit more about concretely what does it mean for us to take a market development approach at UNCDF and some concrete examples of how this translates in our activities?
Thank you so much, Karima. And first of all, well, good evening to everybody. Good morning to those of you that are not in Asia. And then congrats to the entire team that is behind putting together this publication and launching it today. Very, very excited about it. So to answer your question, Karima, let me go back 15 years in time. Don't be scared. I'm not gonna take 15 years to answer. So 15 years ago, organizations and development partners interested in investing in the so-called back then microfinance industry, right, would maybe select one or two microfinance institutions in a country to provide technical assistance, grants, loans, etc. Right? That kind of approach certainly brought some impact, but not the one that we were all hoping for, right? For financial inclusion, and not the one, not only that we were hoping for, but at the speed that we needed for. And so back then, UNCDF, along with others, like-minded organizations led by SIGA, started to really promote a market systems development approach to financial inclusion. So this is not new, right? And UNCDF has employed a market systems development approach to the development of financial inclusive markets for the past 10 years or so in the countries where we work. What is new now is that based on this decade of experience, we're now doing it for the development of digital economies, right? So now it is not about saying, and this is something that I keep on hearing from others that are probably, that want to see the kind of impact that we also want to see, but from others that maybe say, oh, let's do digital and let's maybe finance a cool app for young people or for women entrepreneurs there and here and there, right? That's not exactly what we want here. What we want to have is a last long impact in the countries where we work. So first, we want to, or what we want to do with the market systems development approach is first, identify the market constraints that are preventing consumers and producers to access and use digital innovations in the case of consumers, and pilot and scale up digital innovations for the case of producers, right? So something along the lines of what Preeti was mentioning during her introduction remarks about working with at the supply side and also at the demand side. So first, start identifying those market constraints. Second, support the players to overcome those constraints. So either support developers of digital solutions through technical assistance, blended finance approaches, grants, loans, guarantees, right? And at the same time, also build the capacities for consumers to really access, but also use to the best of their advantage, the digital solutions that are being produced in the market where they are. And third, strengthening the systems and relationships among market players. Something along the lines of what Mr. Julius was mentioning in his intervention, but making sure that governments are able to use the data that is being produced by the programs, right, to precisely develop data-driven policies, right? But at the same time that other players in the market are also able to get the maximum advantage out of that data and are able to develop products and services that really, really meet the needs of those most left behind. Something along the lines of what Cecile was really pointing out during her speech, making sure women and youth are included in the digital economy, right? So those, I would say, are the basics of a digital economy, right? Of this market systems development approach that we're trying to employ here. As I said at the beginning, we bring a decade of experience in facilitating market development, in facilitating market development approaches in inclusive digital financial markets, right? Let me give you some examples. And here in the chat, I saw that some people in Zambia were contributing to the dialogue, and he or she, sorry, she was pointing out to some developments in Zambia. And indeed, UNCDF, for example, supported the development of digital markets in the Zambia. And so, for example, the first thing that we did was, in fact, identifying those market constraints in the Zambia that were preventing people to access digital finance solutions. Here, based on those assessments, we were able to identify projects that help us to increase, for example, access to digital payment networks in those areas that were most left behind. After 5 years of work in the Zambia, we're now able to say that we contributed to having increased financially included people in the Zambia from 4% to 44% in 5 years. Of course, when you're employing a market systems development approach, you can speak about attribution, but you also can speak about contribution. And that's one of the trickiest part of this approach, but also a very exciting one. And that's also because of the conjunction of all these players and all these different pieces coming together, that one working with a market system development approach can really have a long-lasting impact in a certain country.
Yeah, great. Thank you for giving that example. I mean, it's a very telling example indeed. I mean, the work that was done in Zambia really focused on developing the agent networks and solving one of their big issue, which was liquidity in the market. So making sure that they could actually service on a constant basis clients, and with really rather innovative solutions with credit lines that were really, you know, tailored to the actual needs of those agents and help them be able to service, you know, the whole day their clients and not have to stop their business, go to the bank, come back, and avoid, you know, losing business also over time. So very concretely, that these solutions were put in place by, you know, innovating with the players in the market themselves. So yes, thank you for giving that concrete example. I think that's really also telling for the people who are here. And moving to more concrete examples, I would like to come back to Julius Torach and the case of Uganda. And again, the paper with this quote in the paper that is pretty telling also. The paper says, as COVID-19 further accentuates the case for digital transformation that some public institutions have been skeptical about. So there was skepticism, it seems, in Uganda at some point about digitalization. Well, actually now it seems that digitalization of government and its services is no longer an option in Uganda. And so with that quote, I'd like to prompt you, Julius, to tell us a little bit more about, you know, what exactly has happened in terms of digitalization of services by the government in Uganda. What's the percentage of digital services or public services that are now digital, and how does it translate in the lives of people in Uganda, and how does that connect eventually to the SDGs? If you can pack that in like 3-4 minutes.
Thank you very much for that question. Uganda has progressed steadily in the development of e-services. Government of Uganda put in place an e-government policy way back in 2011, and we have continued to steadily implement that policy. And that has been indicated by the global online service index for Uganda, which improved from 50% in 2016 to 58.24% in 2020. And to date, 71% of government services are offered electronically in a number of sectors, including social transfer services, which in a way helps to address the challenge of the issue of the target of no poverty in sustainable development goal. We also have a number of systems in the health sector, which also addresses directly the issue of good health and well-being. as promoted by the Sustainable Development Goal. Here we have e-health systems where people are able to make appointments with medical facilities. They're able to do identifying of location of medical facilities. We have services in agriculture, e-services in education, for smart cities, and many others. So I cannot really elaborate on. You can be able to see the services on our web portal, which is ecitizen.go.ug. And the study we did in 2017, 2018 indicated that government saved up to 4 million working hours because we reduced the lining up in government offices. So government officers can now concentrate on doing their core mandate, where a number of basic services are already online. The other work which we are currently doing is integration of the government systems. We have been having government systems operating in silos, from tax administration, financial payments like integrated financial management systems, integrated payroll and management systems. They have been working in silos. So we are moving on. Government has put in place an integration platform, linking all these systems together onto the national ID database. I wish to mention specifically our contribution towards COVID-19. The Ministry of ICT and National Guidance established a grant and put a call for proposal, and so many people applied to develop again solutions in the health sector, e-commerce, e-payment, and this enabled government to be able, service providers to deliver their goods and services to the doorsteps of the citizens. And this in a way also reduce exposure and improve tracking and management of cases and business continuity. E-learning also was established strongly. Initially, it was not being used that much, but because of COVID and the tools the government put in place, as our children are continuing to study even during lockdown. Remote working was not well established. And so the unified messaging and collaboration system and other communication system were established by government, again with support from, and some with support from partners like UNDP. And this has been very helpful. And during the time of COVID, also some people took advantage. The bad guys were hacking into systems, and there were rumors of communication services, some of them being attacked. So government had to put in measures to address issues of cybersecurity. Not forgetting putting in place information portal, USSD helpline, toll-free numbers, call centers. All these are information platforms. So there have been so many benefits of digitalization. I don't know whether my time still allows. Issues of convenience to citizens, improving of service delivery, improving quality of life to disadvantaged communities, gender equality, and minimizing national digital divide. And this is very clear on the issue of inclusion, because as we are, even right now, government is making some transfers to the citizens who are under lockdown using mobile money. Yeah. And this has been very, very, very useful even during this time of lockdown.
Thank you very much. Yeah, yeah, and I still, my head is trying to go around the figure you mentioned about saving 4 million working hours of your civil servants by simplifying and adapting your systems and digitalizing them. That's pretty telling, and those social transfers you've been able to put in place very quickly in the context of the COVID-19. In particular for the elderly that were really badly hit and needed, financial support. So that's really great. And then I see that there is a question, and so I'm going to tweak a bit my question to you, Maria, if that's possible, to piggyback on the question that one of our participants is asking about, how we actually put in place these digital tools that are expensive or maybe not affordable to many people in LDCs, and also who require special skills. So what does UNCDF concretely do to contribute to curbing that and solving that issue. Would you be able to elaborate a bit on what we do when it comes to supporting the skills, but also, you know, addressing the issue of the infrastructure and the affordability of the devices?
No, absolutely. Well, there's several ways, right? So first, in the issues of skills, right? And I mean, as I said at the beginning, at the UNCDF, we have 4 foundational pillars of work, right? One is policy, another one is infrastructure, another one is innovation, and then the other one is skills. To say that even if we're producing the best digital solutions in the world that we can possibly produce, right, with the best regulatory frameworks and the best infrastructure, if people do not know how to access those tools and use them, our work would be worthless, right? So it's a key and central part of our work, and most of our projects, if not all, have a specific component on skills to make sure that they can people can use them and access them. Now, you start usually with needs assessment, skills needs assessment, developing also training to tackle those specific, to address those needs. Some of the examples that I can give you, we are in particularly just launched a project on skill building, in particular in Bangladesh, in partnership with Visa. This project aims to build the capacity and the digital capabilities of MSMEs, of micro merchants in Bangladesh, in rural Bangladesh. So that's one part. The other part, just to mention some of the work that we have done in the past in the Pacific, we've been very, very successful in supporting the Ministry of Education in integrating financial literacy into the school curricula of Fiji. Also, for example, our investments in youth development, most of them in West Africa, in partnership with the European Union, all of them have components in making sure young people are also receiving the necessary skills to use these solutions. As an example, we are investing in crowdfunding solutions in Ghana. For example, we're piloting 2 of those, and always these solutions have a specific skill building component, digital literacy, but also financial literacy. So that's from the skills part, and then from the affordability part, we usually also work. I mean, it's a combination of things, right? We, of course, work with the regulator to make sure that the regulatory framework has the right elements to increase competitiveness in the markets, right? So the more companies are offering the services, right, the more affordable those services will be, right? So incentives to competition. Then on the other hand, we also do a lot of work with the providers themselves to make sure that there's a business case for them to go into a certain area. We de-risk those investments, and we basically help them to go to a certain area, right? They find more clients there, and then by that business case, they're also able to reduce and make more affordable those services for people. Yeah, and also, I mean, it goes also going hand in hand with the skills building, right? If you have more people that know how to use and access those services, right? So your demand will increase for those services, and ultimately your prices will also, or the services will become more affordable.
Thank you so much, Maria. And I see we're reaching the end of the session. So I would like to thank our panelists, Cecile Billot, Julius Torach, and you, Maria, for this discussion that has given us some insights as to what people can find actually in the publication. So I hope this has given you appetite to actually read the paper and the specific maybe sections that you might want to. to be interested in? Is it in health? Would you want to look at, or what we can do in education, can be done in education when you digitalize services? What aspects of education are we actually digitalizing, can be digitalized, etc. So I'm going to now move to Henri Demel to give us a few words of closing remarks before we end this session. And I invite you to go online because the paper has just been released. There will be also a digital version of the paper. We will be sharing that as it comes out next week. So you can also read it online or on your phone or on the go. So with no further ado, please, Henri, over to you for a few closing words.
Thank you very much, Karima. And thank you so much to our panelists, Cecile, Julius, Maria, for giving us such an interesting range of perspective about the emergence of digital economies and the challenge to really make them inclusive. So I think I think it was a really interesting discussion, and what I think we can all agree about is that digital transformation is there to stay and can play actually a key role to help the recovery of the COVID-19 crisis, but also to support the SDG and the Agenda 2030, provided that we can ensure that the emergence of the inclusive digital economies, are truly inclusive, that it can help to bridge the digital divide, which still exists, the gender gap that still exists, and really kind of provide a value and transformation potential for vulnerable population. We talk about that: youth, women, migrant, refugees, elderly people, people with disabilities. And I wanted to say as a conclusion that, it struck me that today's discussion fits very well in the overarching theme of the high-level political forum, which is about sustainable and resilient recovery from COVID pandemic, with the goal to building inclusive and effective path for the achievement of the SDGs. What struck me is that, this publication we talked about today really builds on and support the ongoing LDC5 consultation process. And as all of UNCDF is really focused primarily to work with LDCs, and in our discussion today to really support the digital transformation journey that they have embarked on. So LDC, again, in the context of the LDC5, have called for leveraging the power of science, technology, and innovation to fight the multi-dimensional vulnerabilities and to achieve the SDGs. And I think, that vision calls for government to successfully implement digital transformation strategies and mobilize investment capital and technical support to build inclusive digital economies, and also to monitor how inclusive they are really. So, all that strikes me to really confirm that the publication we talked about, for me, I really see that as a very practical guide that can be used, as Francois mentioned in the introduction, in a very flexible manner based on the specific needs and interests of the readers, but to really kind of accompany that grand ambitions that is really embedded now in the discussion under LDC5, and also, the broader challenges that developing countries face in building inclusive digital economies. And, it is building on a lot of experience from UNCDF itself, but also from the contribution from external partners. And Karima, you mentioned, like 17 contributions from external partners, which I think makes it a very rich document. And I just wanted to reiterate, UNCDF commitment to really use that strategic publication to really continue to support our engagement in the context of the LDC5, and to really help, the countries in which we work to really, move forward and implement this digital transformation and ensure that it is inclusive, that it can contribute to the SDGs while helping to recover from the COVID-19 pandemic impact. So with that, I wanted to thank you, all of you again, for I think what was a very interesting discussion, and very much looking forward to the next step in continuing that dialogue. Thank you. Back to you, Karima.
Thank you very much, and thank you all for your time and presence for this first event launching our publication. Like I mentioned, we'll have another series of events that will address the next chapter in the paper. But in the meantime, you're now able to browse through it and read through it. So please watch out for our social media channels for the next editions that will follow in September, October, and November. And looking forward to seeing you join us there and with your questions. Okay, thank you. With that, I'd like to close the session, and thank you again. Take care. Have a nice day. Bye.
Goodbye,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Bye.